Hi, everybody. Welcome to Leadership Bootcamp. This is Leading Others Today, the Catalyst for Responsibility teaching session. You're watching the archive right now. Perhaps you're watching it at your desk on Wednesday or Thursday. Perhaps you're watching it in your robe on Saturday or Sunday, but you're watching it. So thank you for joining us. Okay, today we're going to talk about being a catalyst for responsibility. But before we do that, let me just wish you a good morning. So good morning. Weak, very weak. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. So before we go into Catalyst for Responsibility, the next competency, let's talk about systems and maybe some of the things that you gained from systems. So somebody tell me something you're taking away. Maybe you have just finished your analysis of the time matrix, or perhaps you started to build out a new approach for time. Maybe you watched the delegation video. Right? There's a video on delegation. There's a video on motivation. There's a video on effective communication. I'll post tonight a video on implementing change within your work group. So systems, right? The whole idea was I had told you that there will be more information that you could possibly assimilate in a 3-week period. And you could then pick the pieces of information that would be most relevant to you. You need to work on delegation? Go in there and access the information on delegation. Need some tips on how to motivate people? Go in there and access the information. So the model was that we were going to try to help you become a systems thinker, big picture, holistic systems thinker, by exposing you to systems. Now some of you, if you come from an engineering background or a critical thinking background, maybe emergency services, you have to be linear in your thinking. You have to be outcome-based in your thinking. You're trained in some of those ways. But most of us are not. Most of us are not trained to be systems thinkers. So let's, for our first 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, let's just have a discussion, a reflection of systems, thinking, and what you gained. So somebody tell me something you gained from that 3 weeks, the past 3 weeks.
You know those 3 questions that you asked us to pass around?
Yes.
So I did that. And the general consensus was that I should delegate.
Okay.
So I've made that my commitment.
Okay.
Talked about it with the team, explained I wasn't being fair to them by stopping, well not stopping, but preventing them from expanding their horizon.
Okay.
A lot of the time I've been doing stuff because it was easier to do it myself.
Yes. Right.
Nutmeg. So yeah, I've decided
to focus on your commitment would be to delegate more effectively. Now here's the funny thing, and has anybody had a chance to watch that video on delegation? A few of you had. Okay. The simplicity of that approach, that delegation matrix, levels of authority approach, is that it's all based on proficiency. Why is that so important? Why is delegating based exclusively on proficiency critical? Why is that the key to delegation?
Because they have to have core competencies.
Because what often happens in practical terms, I don't want to delegate because what you just said, because it's easier to do it myself because I've been burned. But if you delegate, come on down here. Come on down here. No, just come on down. There's plenty of seats right here in this general area. If I delegate based on capacity and proficiency, then I can have strong assurance that I'm mitigating risk. Because my aversion to delegation, now you say, well, Ian, you're talking in very fluffy behavioral science terms. I am, but it's real. I do not delegate because I'm afraid they're going to screw it up. So how do I mitigate risk of screwing it up? I base it exclusively on proficiency that we mutually agree. We are in agreement that you can handle this. I can handle it. Handle it. Now, what have I just done? And watch this dynamic, please. I've given empowerment. I have empowered them, but I've actually gained more control. The beauty of the model we're talking about is that I've given greater freedom, but taken more control. Does everybody see that? Because what's the accountability level when they say they can do it? What's the accountability level? When this gentleman, I forgot your name, sir.
Guy.
That's right. When Guy looks at me and says, Ian, I can do it. And I look at his past history and say, you know what? You're right. You can do it. What's the accountability level by percentage on his part? 100%. 100% accountability. Because then I can come back and say, Guy, you said you could do it. So for you, your drive to be a better delegator must revolve around a system for delegation. Because that's the other reason we don't delegate well. Because we delegate catch as catch can on the fly. It's never, I don't want to say never, it's rarely methodical, it's rarely systems based, and it's rarely based on some kind of framework that's quantifiable so that I can move. And I can say to him, you're great at this, I'm going to give you greater authority. Fact is, I'm going to give you so much authority that you don't even need to consult with me anymore. When I get to that place, I've now just increased my capacity. But I've mitigated the risk of exposure and difficulty and challenge. So first of all, congratulations. Openly admitting to your peers that you need to work on that level is awesome. Openly admitting to your staff is awesome. You have a tremendous opportunity to gain their loyalty and trust to a whole nother level when you really work on this. I don't know if any of you caught this, what he said. That he said to his team, I haven't been as good, I'm paraphrasing now, I haven't been as good as I could have been. Did you guys catch that he said that to his team? In today's day and age, that's endearing, as long as you back it up with action. So the implementation of a delegation approach with specific individual meetings where you go through their levels of authority or levels of responsibility, you break it down in some way that's proficiency-based, and then you walk it out. And then as you walk it out, you revisit that regularly. And in your guys' specific instance, it fits very, very nicely with EDSSSSSS's. Why they can't be just HR, I don't know. I say that to Sudhir all the time. I'm like, we can't just be HR. He's like, no, we are EDSSSS. Anyways, what do they call it again? The personal development, educational development plan for each individual? Education plan. So they're EDSSSS, but the program is called educational program. I don't get it. Educational plan. So you'll kill two birds with one stone because your delegation matrix is a wonderful support tool to the development of their educational plan.
There's two parts to this, though, Ian, because quite often I'm doing the work because it comes in last minute. So there's an education piece to other departments to get their planning in place, to give us more time. It's not that the team can't do it, it's quite often that they're doing something else already.
Right.
So there's two parts to it.
And what's interesting, not this 3 weeks, but the next 3 weeks when we talk about effective planning, and we talk about being a catalyst for effective planning, how do we get everybody around us to be more efficient without making people feel like they're not doing a good job or coming down on there like a hammer, or having them hang up the phone with you and say, sure, you'll get that as soon as we're ready to give it to you. Right? How many of you had that happen? Where you're trying to get another department or another work group to be more efficient and more effective, but it results in them being upset with you and offended by you, and now your work takes twice as long to get from them, right? So we'll talk about that piece. Are you starting to see that all of this stuff is connected? It's all like this, man. It's not, and that's why I think we make mistakes when we try to just train into one sliver at a time. If you don't take this comprehensively, you don't see how it all relates. That planning relates to delegation, which relates to motivation, which relates to employee sustainability and energy and effort, and all of it connects. If I'm not a good delegator, you're going to have a tough time motivating people, because eventually people will either feel like they're micromanaged and under somebody's thumb, which will destroy motivation, or they'll feel like they're hung out to dry and no one's there to support them, which will destroy motivation. So if I'm not a good delegator, I'm probably not going to be effective at motivation, and vice versa. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I look forward to hearing how that comes along. Somebody else, something that you took away from the last 3 weeks.
How much delegation can you do?
Well, I think you want to get to a place where you can completely delegate. Right? The only role, the ideal would be the only role that you're playing is the role that you're supposed to. Your own jobs and tasks and coaching others. Ultimately, that's what today's leader should be doing. That I have my own roles and responsibilities, of which the primary role and responsibility as leader is this: make everybody around me better. So I should be able to delegate out 100%, ideally. But you and I know that that ideal is rarely reached. It's rarely reached because people's capacity is not at 100%. Yours is not at 100%. How many of you would say you have full and complete mastery of all of your job responsibilities? None of you. Just like your people do not have full mastery of their complete responsibilities. And even if they did have full mastery, then the challenge for you is to keep them engaged and motivated to execute that full mastery over a long period of time. So then you would have to come up with unique and different ways to continue to motivate them, expand their skill set. But I do think you can get to a place where you have, where you've gotten people to that last category. Act on own and report periodically. I do think you can get people to that place. I don't know if that answers your question, but why do you ask the question?
I mean, can you delegate 100% and you don't have to do anything?
Well, I will say this. I know for myself, I was able to. Now, let's be clear what we mean here. When we're talking about delegation, what we're saying is ensuring that the responsibilities that they have, they are doing to a degree that would be at standard or beyond. That doesn't mean you get to offload your work and sit in your office with your feet on the desk. That's not what we're saying.
That's not what I mean, though.
Okay. And so, and oftentimes we are charged with having to do things that under the organizational structure others should be doing, but they're unable to because they don't have the capacity. So what we're trying to do is give them as much as they have tolerance for, but mitigate our risk by walking with them in those in between. So you're going to do it, I'm going to do it, and then the stuff in between. So I do think you can get to a place where I've delegated 100%. The difference is I'm managing that process. I'm managing the process. So just because I've delegated to you, notice in every one of those 4 categories, if you remember what we're talking about, 4 categories: ask and recommend, act and report immediately, act and report periodically, act on own. Even in ask and recommend, I've delegated because I'm not doing it. Everybody clear on that? So, well, hold on one second. Because what he said was he was often doing stuff himself because it was just easier to do it. All I'm saying is I'm not going to do anything myself that's not my responsibility. Because at minimum, he's going to come to me and ask me about it, make a recommendation, and then I'm going to say, go do it. But I'm not doing it because guess what? I don't have time to do it. I got my own stuff to do. So we're not talking about offloading our own responsibilities. We're talking about ensuring that others are doing their responsibilities. But I'm managing the risk of where they lack proficiency. Because it ends up coming to my desk and I end up doing it because they don't know how or they're not good at it. Does that make sense? So in that sense, I think you could delegate out 100%. So the only thing that I want to be involved in is areas where you have low proficiency. And that 22% or 25% and his 15 to 20% and her 15 to 20% and her 15 to 20%, I can manage that. I can manage to help you with 15% of your situation, 20% of your situation, as opposed to helping you with 100% of your situation. Go ahead.
If you're delegating all your work out to all your people, you're still carrying the load of the responsibility of everything coming back and being done.
Well, I think what you mean is you don't mean delegating out your own work 100% of the time.
Whatever's put on to me, I delegate out to, say, 6 or 8 people, right, to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
I still have to follow up to make sure it's done because I have to answer to people ahead of me.
I'm gonna parse words with you just to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm only delegating out my responsibilities, in my opinion, to people who need further growth because they're stagnant in their own work. So when I'm offloading my own responsibilities to somebody, I'm only offloading those responsibilities if they are at a place where they have their own self-mastery. So I'm giving them an additional task to help them grow. What I think you're saying is, and I hope we're all clear on this, oftentimes I end up carrying other people's load because they don't have the capacity, or they don't have the skill, or they don't have the knowledge, or they don't have the insight. So on top of my own responsibilities, I have to do other people's work as well. So I want to stop. How many can acknowledge you've experienced what I'm talking about? So we want to stop that immediately, because that's going to free up 5, 8, let's just say it frees up 4 hours of your week. We're going to stop that. And how are we going to stop it? By creating this matrix of, here, you're going to do it all, but I'm here to support you where you're weak. Or maybe that's not the right word. I'm here to support you where you don't have proficiency. That's different than, I have a bunch of stuff to do, and I'm going to give you some of my work, and I'm going to give you some of my work, and I'm going to give you some of my work, and I'm going to give you some of my work, because I don't want to do any work. That's different. Am I going to offload some of my work? I will. If this person is stagnant and needs growth, I might offload some of my work to them to help teach them and grow them and help them move forward. But if I'm constantly looking for ways to do less work by giving my work to everyone else, that's not what we're trying to achieve here. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right. Anybody else? Something you took away? Maybe from the time matrix, the time dialogue. Yes?
Well, I worked with my supervisor on a work program for the next 12 to 18 months, and then I began to align the tasks with the people and have an alignment in terms of then having a hierarchy for accountability relative to the work plan.
Oh, very good. That's very good. And how was that received by that person?
Which way, up or down?
Both.
Well, I think well received, up, down. We're still hammering out the details.
And you've included them in that hammering?
Absolutely.
Okay, but eventually you'll get there. As long as you're sincere about them having input, you'll be fine. Anybody on the time exercise? So we put a lot of time into the discussion around time. So anybody have any thoughts, anything that you've observed, anything you noticed about yourself, any changes that you made? Because we spent a lot of time on the discussion about time. Still not enough hours in a day. Yes, sir.
Well, I think it's an exercise in organization and, and using the tools of Outlook, Microsoft Outlook is that
Sure.
to its fullest capability.
Ultimately, it's about alignment. If your car's out of alignment, how much more money does that cost? How much more wear and tear? It lacks efficiency if your car's out of alignment, correct? If your back's out of alignment, it causes significant pain, significant anguish in your own personal health. If your daily activities are out of alignment with your long-term goals, that causes significant stress, challenges, and the like. So the difference between maximizing the utilization of your time and time management is that this is proactive in establishing the goals that you play, you identify the roles that you play, and this is critical, you identify those activities that give you a greater return. An example, he's going to sit down with his staff, he's going to walk through with each one of them these levels of authority, these levels of responsibility. He's going to have some kind of document that's generated from that. I would say he's going to put in at least 2 hours per person in that exercise. How many direct reports do you have? 5. So he's going to put in, let's call it 15 to 18 hours into this. In a time to return on investment equation, if he does that well, how many hours do you think he'll pick up because of that? 15 to 18 hours invested. Well, if he just picks up 2 hours a week of efficiency between him and his direct report times 5, that's 10. Which means he could double his investment in the first month. So he's going to put in 15 to 18 hours. He's going to try to pick up 2 hours per person per week, which means that he'll get, by the end of the month, he'll pick up 20, 2 hours per person, 40, which means within the first 2 months, he'll pick up 80 hours of efficiency compared to the 10 to 15 hours or 20 hours he invests. Now, Ian, why do you break it down like that? Because time is a perishable commodity. If I'm not looking for those activities that, when done, give me more hours than the doing of, I'm in trouble. Most of you didn't have a chance to watch the coaching session, and I know that the coaching sessions are in the middle of the workday, at the beginning of the workday. Sometimes they're difficult. But one of the things I talked about in the coaching session was, what is a high return on investment activity? It's the activity that you can get 6 things done with, or 4 things, or 5 things done with. An example, let's say I work at the water, let's say part of my responsibility is a water treatment plant, but I have an office far away. How many of you agree with me? One of the complaints would always be, I can never get out to the plant. Too busy to get out to the plant. I can't get to the plant because I don't have time to get to the plant. But an hour at the plant, what do I get done? 1, I'm building relationship with my employees. 2, I'm checking on standards and our policies and our protocols and our procedures. 3, I'm identifying any personnel issues or challenges. I'm checking on quality. I could probably list 6 things that I'm doing by spending that hour. That's a high return on investment activity. How about this one? No matter what your responsibility is in this room. I know I need to meet with my people. How many of you have had that at the end of the week, you've said that to yourself? God, I need to spend more time with my people, but I just don't have time. An hour with one of your direct reports of undivided attention to your direct report kills about 8 different birds with 1 stone. And yet you feel like you don't have time. I don't have time to do that. But if you really break it down, that 45 minutes invested will save you 10 hours in the next month. More effective communication, alignment of energy and resources. You find out a problem before it actually turns into a mushroom cloud. By proactively identifying these activities that would give you more than the actual time invested, you become more effective and you become more efficient. So that maximizing utilization of your time, identifying your goals, identifying your roles, identifying the high return on investment activities, and then, and this is critical, proactively putting those in your week first. They're the first things you put in your week. They're not the last thing that you put in your week. I need to meet with my people. And then my week fills up, another week where I didn't meet with my people. I need to meet with my people. Another week where I didn't meet with my people. And then you got 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and then you finally say, screw it, I'm never going to meet with my people. Until you get a survey from EDSSSSSS that says you're a jerk. How many of you know what I'm talking about? No, don't raise your hand. I don't want. Right? Because then you get a survey that says, we've got a problem in your area because everybody thinks you're a jerk. And you're thinking to yourself, crap, if I would have just met with my people. So by blocking in those things first, and then you block in the things that you can assume, and then, the things that you know are going to happen and the things you're going to assume. Email, phone calls, and the like. How many of you realized you were urgency addicted? Raise your hand if you've realized you were urgency addicted. 1 is honest enough. That's Diane saying, hi everyone, I'm Diane. I'm urgency addicted. Right? Hi, I'm Diane. So, why are we urgency addicted?
It makes us feel important.
That's one reason. Why else?
Raises adrenaline.
Adrenaline, why else?
I try to see because my boss, I try and please him for everything that he wants to get done.
Okay.
Because everything comes to him comes from the higher up, and they want it done yesterday.
And why is that, though?
I don't know, it's just a personal thing.
No, it's not.
No, it's just something I grew up with. I work with planning.
Because life has become urgency addicted. The expectation is that you respond immediately. Why? Because everything is now become an immediate response. We are an immediate. How many of you 10 years ago were just happy you could see the photo on the internet? You would wait. You would wait the 30 seconds for the photo to download. Remember, it was like this. And you were like, wow, my baby, look how beautiful. How many remember this? Right? And you were like, this is so cool. Now, if it literally takes more than a millisecond, you're like, well, what the hell's wrong with my browser? What the hell's wrong with Telus and Bell? Right? Because we as a society have created this dynamic that if it's longer than a millisecond, we feel like we're not getting a response. And whether it's from the innate object, whether it's from an organization, or whether it's from another human being. We have created a dynamic. So how do we break that dynamic? I think one of the ways to break that dynamic is things like the delegation matrix, because now I'm managing the feedback process. I'm managing the expectation process. One of the things that if you didn't watch all of the emails and all of the videos, which I understand that you may not have, I try to manage that process. I'm not going to let my boss tell me that every single thing has to be done in the next 5 minutes, because it's not possible. So I'm going to manage the process. When they come to me and say, I need you to do blank, I'm going to respond with, no problems. I'm happy to do that. Hold on 1 second. No problems. I'm happy to do that. Can I have that for you by next blank? I'm going to set the expectation time frame, because I know I can't get it done in the next 3 hours. I'm buried. Now, if they respond back to me and say, no, I need that by blank day, no problems. I'm happy to do that. But I'm going to manage the expectations of those around me. Otherwise, you get, and I see it on some of your faces sometimes, when I see you, you're carrying the weight and the pressure of the world on your back because you've set up unattainable expectations. There's only 168 hours in a week. Of those 168 hours, there's only 100 to 110 that are usable. You have multiple roles in your life. You have multiple roles in your life. I do think, and even if it's Glenn, I think it's okay to look to a leader and say, I've got 17 priorities. I need you to help me to determine which of the 17 is going to shift to the bottom with this new one you've just put to the top. The only kind of people that can get away with that are what kind of people? People that are highly organized and can say, here are the things that I'm working on. Which one of these do you want me to move down one notch so that new thing can move to the top? Now, is that insubordinate? I don't think it's insubordinate. I actually think it's being a good lieutenant. I think it's being a good soldier. But only if you have managed the process well. Or you can show, here are my week, here's what I got planned, here are my long-term goals, here's what we're doing. We have a plan, boss. Now you want me to shift that, and I'm happy to shift it because ultimately I'll do what you tell me to do. However, I need you to help me prioritize here. Do you think that that's reasonable? Now let's talk practically. Do you feel like you might get in trouble for that?
I've done that, but it gets a little more complicated with elected officials.
Absolutely true.
So,
Yeah, that's a whole different skill set, right? That's a whole different negotiation. And proactively education, right? Making that elected official aware of the inner workings, making them aware of what happens, making them aware of the dynamics.
their role.
Absolutely. That their role is not operational.
Exactly.
That's their role as the duly elected official is vision, direction, governance, and fiduciary responsibilities. That they are not operational managers. That in the CAO or city manager style of government, their role is to big picture, vision, governance, fiduciary. That's why we have a city manager or a CAO, chief administrative officer, to run things. And that's why we have department directors and managers and the like. But let's be honest, in other municipalities, in other parts of Canada, in other parts of the world, it is an elected official or mayor-driven model, where the mayor is the chief administrative officer. And the mayor appoints directors and the like. And then when the mayor leaves, those directors leave usually. That's the way it works in some places, right? And there's pros and cons to both. Okay, anybody else? Systems. Anybody else, any other comments on systems before we jump into the next competency? Okay, I cannot overemphasize this dialogue around systems. If you don't have quality systems that are comfortable to you, fit well with you, you're going to be out of alignment. You're going to have some real challenges in today's pressure-packed, high-expectation environment. So whether it's systems around time, whether it's systems around delegation, whether it's systems around motivation, systems, I would encourage you to thoughtfully consider adding them to your toolkit. And I would also encourage you to thoughtfully consider them because you can teach them. You can teach them. I really believe in my heart of hearts, if we don't have a culture of learning, and I do commend Glenn, Brian, Sadir, and others, they are trying to create a culture of learning. Now what that does is, it means that you guys have to go through a lot of training, which can be a pain in the ass. But, except for me, of course. But I do think they're trying to create a culture of learning. Because if we are a learning organization, then we're a growing organization. If we're a growing organization, we're an adaptable organization. All right. The next competency. The next competency is what we call catalyst for responsibility. What does that mean? How do I get another human being to take more responsibility than they took the day before? Where does it come from? Well, I always observed as a young leader, I kept figuring that there were certain people that, when given the opportunity, on a daily basis, did more than their job. They did more than their job. And not only do they do more than their job, but if they saw a problem, they'd attack the problem. I didn't have to tell them what to do. I didn't have to ask them to do more. They just naturally were doing more than they were asked to do. Any of you know somebody like that? So then I started saying to myself, could I replicate that? Could we take that and get it into another human being? And I thought to myself, well, I don't know. Could we do that? Or is it just born in them? So I tried to find historical precedent. Was there anywhere in history that someone had done this community-wide? Because you also saw it in communities. There were some communities, or even neighborhoods, where everybody took care of their front yard. And then there was other neighborhoods where nobody took care of their front yard. And then there was certain communities that everybody grew up their kids and took responsibility for their kids. And then there was other communities that nobody gave a crap about their kids. And were people just born that way? Or people were just born idiots? Or people were just born brilliant? And I thought to myself, I don't know. Were there some ingredients here? And I came across, historically, what most people will say, and you and I have talked about this, is the greatest city-state in the history of mankind. The greatest city in the history of mankind. Athens. Athens. Athens, the birthplace of democracy. Athens, the birthplace of arts and culture as we know it today. Athens, actually the birthplace of thinking the way we think in Western society, which is very different than the way that they think in the East and the Middle East. Very different. It's a Greek way of thinking. It's very different. It's not good or bad, right or wrong, it's just different. And so much of what we are in Western society today literally comes from that one town, Athens. And there was a 30-year period where historians say Athens was at its pinnacle. They called it the Golden Age. And the leader during that time was a guy named Pericles. Anybody heard Pericles? Pericles of Athens. The first time I came to Fort McMurray, this talk that I gave at the Leading the North conference, I talked about Fort McMurray and the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo having the potential to be the Athens of the 21st century. And that was the genesis of this program. How could we be this beacon on a hill? How could we be this shining light on a pedestal to what community could be in the 21st century? And I challenged your city leaders and your elected officials and your business leaders to aspire to be that. In my exploration of history, I came across a quote from this leader Pericles. Now you got to know about this leader Pericles. He was not like a prime minister. He was not like a president. He was not like a king. There were 10 leaders of his same equal authority. So he was one of 10. There was no political machine. He was not a billionaire. He was a regular citizen who had risen to a level of authority, but he was not this guy like you would think today, that had this political machine behind him, that had all kinds of money in the bank. No, that's not how Athens worked. You were one of 10 leaders with no more or less authority. It was a true democracy, which meant this, which meant that all of us came together, 6,000 and 7,000 people coming together at one time and voting on the issues of the day. They literally voted every day, 7,000, 8,000, 6,000 people coming to the assembly and voting. How many say you talk about being inefficient today? Imagine how inefficient that was. But there's some purity about that. So somehow Pericles had to get you to give more. Somehow Pericles had to get you to risk your life. Now, it wasn't like Sparta. They didn't threaten you with death. So in Sparta, they threatened you with death. They said, you will give everything you have to the state or we'll kill you. In Sparta, you started your service to the state at the age of 7 and 8. And it was compulsory service. You had to serve the state till you were 50. And then you would be released. Not in Athens. In Athens, you were free. In Athens, you could choose to serve the state or not. Now, you have to remember the context of it. Landholding men were citizens. So, ladies, you wouldn't have been a citizen. So don't send me an email saying, well, yeah, that's not really. Okay, within the context of the day. But here was the crazy thing. Somehow, Pericles was able to get you to give your all. Now, how do I know that? Well, I know because of the work. I know that because of the legacy. But I also know that because of the wars. So there was an invasion. Anybody ever heard of Marathon? The Marathon. What does the Marathon come from? Anybody know where does the Marathon come from? Yes? The Greek will tell us.
The messenger leaves the battlefield, runs to Athens, and says we won, and he drops dead. And it's 26 miles.
That's right. Now, that's what most of us know as the story. But does anybody know what the battle was?
It's against the Persians.
It was the invading force that outnumbered the Athenians probably 5 or 6 to 1. It was the strongest military power in the history of mankind up until that point. And somehow, a group of farmers, known as Hippolytes, but they were farmers, make no mistake, merchants, farmers, and the like, citizen soldiers, turned out and defeated the greatest fighting force in the history of mankind up until that point. Why? Because they were free. Why? Because somehow Pericles and others had instilled in them their love for Athens. Why? Because they had pride in their community. Why? Because they defended freedom, or that essence of what freedom was. It's a phenomenal story. And know this, and check me if you think I'm wrong. Go back and check. It was one of the defining moments in history. Because if they would have lost, then the Persian king would have come, taken over Athens and the rest of Peloponnesia. And if he would have taken over the rest of Peloponnesia, would we have freedom today? Democracy and the like? Probably not. Because it was in its infancy. So if we lose, if the Athenians lose on the battlefield of Marathon, you probably don't have free society today because the world would have gone a different way. Most historians say it was one of the defining moments of history. Why is that a big deal to us, Ian? Why do you take us on these historical journeys? Frickin' Pericles, Archimedes, what are you doing? How do I get another human being to give me everything they have? How do I get another human being to take care of their front yard? How do I get another human being to bust his butt and make sure the equipment is clean and make sure it's safe and well run, and yet I'm not around? How do I get the best from another human being and not have to be standing next to them? How many of you agree with me that might have an impact in your leadership ability? That's what we're going to talk about. Now, here's the interesting quote that blew me away. Listen what he said. If Athens would appear, this is Pericles speaking now, through the historians. If Athens would appear great to you, then consider her glories were purchased by valiant men who understood their responsibility and acted on their duty. So somehow Pericles was clear on being able to get people to understand the responsibility they have and turn that into action. Somehow Pericles was clear on getting people to buy in to the risk of, all the way to the risk of life. People would buy in so deeply they would risk their lives. Somehow Pericles was able to educate, inform, because he didn't have other weapons. He didn't have any authority. He couldn't force them to do anything because they were in a true democratic free society. And he could be ousted at any point, any day, any time. So how do you get another human being to give their all? Now, take it from its historical context. Now let's jump forward to today. I think we're in that dynamic again because people could care less if you have a title. You're not going to be able to walk in and throw your title around to get somebody to move. They're all going to look at you like this, whatever. So it's funny how we've come full circle, and people are now looking and saying, I don't care if you have a title. I want to respect you, and then I'll move. I want to believe in your ideas, and then I'll move. I want to believe that you're a good person, and then I'll move. I want to believe you're authentic and sincere, and then I'll get off my big fat couch and get something done. But if I don't believe those things about you, I ain't doing crap. And how many of you know that employee? So now all of a sudden, we've come full circle historically. So I looked at that and I said to myself, aha, I've got to be a catalyst for responsibility. Notice catalyst. I don't have to do it all myself. I can't. There's not enough time, energy, or effort at my disposal. Somehow I got to get this guy to give me more. And are there some ingredients to doing that? I think there are. And over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about 3 things. How do I get buy-in from another human being? We always talk about that, buy-in, buy-in, buy-in. How do I use this magic force? Now, anybody ever seen the movie The Hobbit? Like, I'm not a big Hobbit guy, but last time I came here, I flew Air Canada on the red eye from Toronto, and I was bored and I couldn't fall asleep, so I watched The Hobbit movie, right? Frodo and Bilbo and all those guys, and they had the magic ring. Well, I'm going to give you a magic force. It's called pride. How do I instill, cultivate, and deploy pride as a performance management tool? We're going to talk about that. And then finally, creating my own code of conduct. Because if in today's day and age, if people don't find you to be sincere and authentic, they will not give you their all. So those are the 3 things we're going to talk about over the next 3 weeks. As far as pride specifically, we're going to take 3 days to talk about pride. But we're going to start that discussion today. Pride. So how do I get another human being to take more ownership? So the catalyst for responsibility is the competency. Today's leader places a priority on engaging and cultivating ownership and responsibility. So in other words, I proactively. So Terry's over there at this old Centennial Pool, right? Yeah, see, I even know that location. I've been over there. He's got his warehouse over there. And somehow he's got to get his people, when he's not around, to feel like it's theirs. Now, another phrase that people are using a lot is entrepreneur. You want to create an environment where each individual feels like an entrepreneur, that they own what they're doing. Well, you could use that, or you could just say that you want people to take greater responsibility. So let's go to this page right here, and let's quickly take the test. So I'll just read them randomly, the indicators of where you line up to this competency. I'll just read them randomly. You start rating yourself. 1, I'm totally not like that. 10, I'm all about that. Okay, 1, I believe I have responsibility to my employees, my organizations, and community. Now, it may seem trite, but responsibility begins with a belief in your heart that you have the ability to respond. You know a lot of people in your life that just won't take responsibility. They refuse to. They look at the situation around them and they just choose not to take responsibility. So I think it begins with a mindset that I am responsible for my world. I am responsible for those things around me. I am responsible for the kids here in Fort McKay, even though I don't live in Fort McKay. Or I am responsible for the kids in Fort Chip, even though I don't live here. The fact that you guys ready for this? You know what I learned last time I was in Fort Chip? The boys' bathroom at the school doesn't have running water. So any of you guys in public works, the boys' bathroom at the Fort Chip Elementary School has no running water. How many say that's completely unacceptable? Where do they wash their hands? You ready for this? There's no stalls. So I'm a grade 3 little boy. I got to walk into the boys' bathroom. I got to sit on the toilet while all the other kids watch me. How many say that's unacceptable? So you know what the kids do when they have to go to the bathroom? What do? Somebody tell me what they do. They go home. And do they come back? No. So there's no running water in the bathroom, and there's no stall. And guess what? To put a kicker on it, there's no door to the bathroom. Unacceptable. Unfreaking acceptable. So we were up there in this meeting. And Joanne Roberts, Director of Public Affairs, is sitting in the room. Maggie Farmington, Director of Rural Affairs. We're all sitting there, and these people are telling us this. And what's our natural inclination? What's our natural inclination? What do we all say? Disbelief. We're going to get this fixed. Two of the ladies, 2 of your fellow boot camp participants, Tamara and Connie, raise their hand. And I'm just appalled. What? Well, does the school board know? Oh, the school board's known since the beginning of the school year. This has been going on since the beginning of the school year. How many say even more unacceptable? So, you know what they raised their hand and said? We started a PTA. What? We started a home and school council. We're going to get it fixed. I said, you're going to do what? We're going to get it fixed. We're going to go in, find out why the water's not working. We're going to get the water turned on. We're not going to wait for the Northland School District or school board or whatever the hell it is. We're going to get this thing fixed. Our kids should have running water. It's a public health issue. Our kids should have a stall. It's just a moral issue. We're going to get this fixed. And I said, well, what do you need? I'll call, as soon as I get down to Fort McMurray, I'll start calling guys that I know in the construction business. I'll have 5 guys on planes up here through McMurray Aviation. We'll get this fixed tomorrow. Nope. Let us fix it. It's our town. We don't need someone flying in to fix it. How many agree with me? That's responsibility. How many agree with me? If all the citizens in Fort Chip started thinking like that, would that save the government money, yes or no? Would it save the government money, yes or no? Yes. Absolutely. So the challenge for all of us is, in my opinion, that begins with a human being saying, I'm responsible. Now, not to toot the horn of the program, I asked those 2 ladies, how long has it been that there hasn't been a parent-teacher organization or home and school council in Fort Chip? Their response, there's never been. And I said, why did you guys start it? Because we realize we can do something, that we have the capacity, we can lead. So in Fort Chip, at least, this program has helped them realize they have a responsibility. So don't walk by that first one. Don't just blow it off and say, well, that's kind of trite. Do you really believe in your heart of hearts that this community is a direct reflection of you? Do you really believe in your heart of hearts that this organization is a direct reflection of you? And do you believe in your heart of hearts that the people you lead are a direct reflection of you? Now, I'm not saying you take on the problems of the whole world, but within your little corner of it, do you believe you have a responsibility? All right, next one. I believe that that others are capable and have the right to make decisions that affect their situation. I believe that each person has knowledge, experience, and skills that strengthen. Guys, I need glasses. Yeah, a team. Thank you. I can apply a catalyst approach. What's a catalyst approach? That's the recognition that I can't do it all, and so I'm just going to try to help get it off the ground. Does anybody know somebody who's going to Ghana for this Ghana trip? Does anybody know any employees going to Ghana? So you got 22 employees going to Ghana to take that playground from Franklin Avenue at the old geared to income housing there, and they're sending it to Ghana, and they're going in August. Some of your fellow employees to install it in an orphanage in a school in Ghana. So what's my role? My role in that was just to be the catalyst, get it off the ground, because I can't do it all. So do you walk with a catalyst approach? I understand the importance of articulating organizational values. I define issues as opportunities that motivate action. I'm receptive to alternative solutions and foster responsiveness. You're not going to get anybody to buy in if they think you're a closed door. You're not going to get anybody to buy in if they think that you're a wall. You're not going to get anybody to buy in. I develop relevant and beneficial working relationships. I implement strategies to assist individuals and groups and deal with process of change. I can facilitate consensus building. I mobilize human resources. So I'm either 1, I'm 10, I'm somewhere in between. Okay. Now, over the next 3 weeks, what I've got to do is I've got to give you some tools in your toolkit to be Pericles. I've got to give you some tools in your toolkit to get other people to say, you know what, I'll own that. Or I'll take it to a greater degree. So we're going to talk about a code of conduct, we're going to talk about pride, and we're going to talk about buy-in. In addition to that, I'm going to give you a way to gather thoughts, ideas, and concerns. That's a supplemental video that'll just be on there. So when you have some time over the next 3 weeks, just look in. There's about a 25-minute teaching video on a system, a process for gathering thoughts and ideas and concerns, because that's a part of gaining buy-in, of getting people to give their opinion. The problem usually is that a suggestion box, even surveys, are a waste of time because we don't have a good system for it. So I'll give you a good system. But first, if I'm going to get somebody else to take responsibility, all behavioral science tells us that it has to do with how they relate to me personally. So a step that I think would be relevant, important, and valid for you to take. I think you need to create a code of conduct. How many of you have a formal code of conduct that you operate by? Anybody? Okay, some of you have it. You developed it over a period of time. So if you have a formal code of conduct, kudos, good on you, but maybe it needs to be revisited. If you haven't taken the time to build a code of conduct, then I would encourage you to do so. What's a code of conduct? What does that even mean? What's that? Pride in what you do, a code of conduct. Somebody else, what's a code of conduct? Governs your behavior. So it says right there, a personal system of principles, values, standards, and behaviors that grade what you think, that guide what you think, say, and do. In today's day and age, I'm not going to give my allegiance to Guy unless I really think that Guy is authentic, is sincere, and can be trustworthy. If I don't think that Guy is trustworthy, I'm not going to give him everything I have. I'll come to work because I have mortgages to pay or I have kids to feed. I'll come to work. But I'm not going to give you my all unless I think you're worthy of my all. In some white space free of charge, write this. I must get people's permission to lead them. Today, I must get people's permission to lead them. In the past, my title, my authority was enough. Not anymore. Not anymore. I got to get people's permission. So how am I going to try to get people's permission to lead them? I'm going to establish a code of conduct. This is who I am. This is what you can count on. How many of you have worked for this person? How many of you work for that person? That one day they're here, the next day they're there. And then one day they're here. You're not going to give your all to that. It's not safe. You're not a fool. You're not going to give your allegiance to this because it's not in your, it's unsafe. It's unpredictable. So by having a code of conduct, people can start to realize what they can start to imagine what they can expect. People will start to say to themselves, okay, I can read this person. I can understand what I'm going to get. How many of you would be okay with a boss that's a jerk as long as they're a jerk all the time? As long as they're consistently a jerk every day, good. At least I can deal with it. But when they're this, I can't deal with it. It's too much of a roller coaster. I think that begins with a code of conduct. Okay, so we're going to build one right now. And if you already have one, you're going to revisit it. And it's the simplicity of it is just 3 questions. So let's ask the 3 questions, and I want you to kind of fill out the answers. So question number 1. What are 3 values you hold dear, and how would people see it every day? What are 3 values that you hold dear, and how would people see it? 3 values that you hold dear, and how would people see it? 3 values that you hold dear, and how would people see those 3 values? Here. You're welcome. 3 values that people hold dear, and how would people see it in your day? So somebody share with me one of yours. 3 values. Okay, somebody said honesty. Honesty, and how would I see honesty? Okay, but how would I see it in your everyday activity if I was one of your employees? How would I see honesty in action every day from you?
You do what you say.
Well, let him answer. It's his value.
That I would perform in the manner in which I believe is true and honest to the core values of the organization.
Which sounds awesome. Thank you very much, but I'm going to beat you up a little bit, if that's okay. Okay, so honesty in practical application. Sorry about crushing your microphone there, Mr. James. So, true, let me rephrase that. A practical approach to me walking out that value would be that I meet with my direct reports individually once a month, and I share with them transparently what they can expect in the next 90 days. How many of you agree with me? That would be a manifestation of a value of honesty. So what I'm trying to get you guys to do is not just identify what you stand for. I'm trying to get you to translate it into daily, weekly, or monthly activity. Because that's authenticity. Authenticity is when I am what I say I am more times than not. Listen now. I'm not trying to put the pressure on you to be perfect. All I'm trying to get you to do is proactively identify what you are and who you are, and then translate that into daily activity, and notice the qualifier, more times than not. How many of you agree with me you could live to that standard? The more times than not standard. Not the perfect standard. I'm not trying to be, not perfect. More times than not. Okay, so honesty, if that's a value, then you're going to say to yourself, If I really am operating on a value of honesty, then the practical application of that could be that once a month I meet with my direct reports and tell them what is really going on in the organization to the best of my ability. What's that?
Every day.
Okay, you're doing it every day. The only reason I would make it a more formal monthly, because every day hectic, busy, every day. So in his thing, he's saying I'm doing it every day. All right. Somebody else, a value that you have.
I don't like people lying to me.
Okay. Honesty, no lies.
I tell them that either it didn't get done, but don't lie to me, right? Because I don't want to be put on the spot where I can tell somebody's done, and I go back the next day and find out it's not done. I'd sooner you just tell me it's not done than lie to me, right?
Okay. Very good. Somebody else, a value.
Integrity.
Okay. Integrity. How do I see integrity from you?
Basically, what I do is I under promise, over deliver.
Okay. So I think I'm hearing you say is when you establish a timeline, you make sure that the timeline is doable. You make sure the timeline is articulated. You make sure the timeline is understood by all involved, and you build a plan to reach that timeline. Okay? That would be a manifestation of integrity. How about this? If one of your values, how many of you would raise your hand and say one of your values is the importance of others? Okay, a few of you, importance of others. Now, I'm going to be a jerk, so work with me on this. You're always a jerk, Ian. Okay.
We can work with that.
Oh, you can work with that. Thank you. If you're unorganized, if you don't have a plan for your people for the next 12 months, how many would agree with me you don't value your people very much?
I don't have a plan for the next 12 months, but I can work on a plan for the next week or two to stay ahead of it.
Which is awesome, and that's better than not having a plan at all. But if you truly valued your people, you would do everything you could to have a plan for as long as you possibly could. Am I right or wrong? I think you would. Now, that's strategic planning. And how many agree with me that there might be tactical changes to that plan? And I don't want to go into a long dissertation about it because we'll actually have 3 weeks of it coming in a few weeks. But why are plans so important in showing value to another human being? How is a plan a manifestation of I value you?
Predictability.
Predictability, safety and
I
security.
take it you mean that you're going to articulate that plan somehow.
Or,
For me to create a plan and keep it to myself.
well, yeah, exactly.
Honesty or integrity to anybody.
Amen. It's and not only am I going to articulate it, but hopefully if I truly value them, what did I do with them? I helped them they helped me build the plan. That would be true valuing them. Are you starting to see the difference between a code of conduct that sits on the wall and a code of conduct that's in play every day? How many of you have had bosses that say they were a certain thing, but in daily practicality they were never that? And what's our check and balance? You'll see how this is all building on itself. What's our check and balance to see if you're authentic or not? What tool did I give you? What exercise did I give you that you could check regularly whether you're authentic or not? Well, he did it. He sent out that survey. You just send out that survey every 90 days, and you'll see if you're authentic. Because authenticity is just this. I say what I am, and I do it more times than not. That's authenticity. The check and balance to that, I send that survey out every 90 days. All right, one last one. Somebody give me a value, something that you value. 3 things that you value. So somebody give me one, another one, that we haven't heard yet.
A public morality.
Okay, what does that mean?
That means that you have an ethical commitment to do things when people aren't looking.
Okay, so tell me how people would see that in your daily activity.
Well, in terms of courtesy, responsiveness to the public, prudent use of the public funds.
Drill down even deeper. Come on, give me a practical way that I would see that value. Because how many of you agree with me? It's not a value unless I could see it practically. Yes or no? It's not. Unless I can see it practically. If it's not translated into practical action.
Well, it's a dedication to public service, is it?
Those are all good words, Mr. Greek man, but come on, Pericles. Get down to the heart of the matter. So how about this? We respond to the public within 24 hours. That standard and it being executed would be a manifestation of what you just said, the public trust, stewardship, and the like. Or how about this? Our application processes, our submittal process, our turnaround of plans submitted is within blank time frame, which is underneath the industry standard. And because it's underneath the industry standard, it is an indication of our value of you as a citizen or our responsiveness or the like, right? That would be tangible. So let's try to avoid the flowery, big pick. Let's get down to the heart of the matter. If I say that I value you as an employee, like it's an example, and this is not an example that you could do, just side note, but it is an example. So I used to say we valued employees. So who hired their supervisors? The employees. The final interview for a management position was done by the employees. Why? Because we valued employees. Uniforms. We had to have uniforms in my past life. Who picked the uniforms? The employees. They helped design them. Who created the policies and procedures within that casino for handling money? The employees. Because that was a manifestation of our value of their worth. You're important. Well, if you're important, you'll get to help pick your boss. If you're important, then you'll help us give us input on uniforms and the like. If you're important, you'll help build the policies and procedures that govern you. Where else do you hear that? What did I just describe? You get to have input on the laws that govern you. You get to have input on your leaders. That's called a free society. It's called a free society. So why wouldn't we run our organizations that way? Now I know within a governmental entity, because of checks and balances, transparency, governmental entity, stewardship of public funds, you can't live that ideal that I just described. But the closer you could get to that ideal would be a manifestation that I value you. Because if I value you, I'd let you participate in the process. If I didn't value you and just was talking, I would exclude you from the process. Okay, next question. What are 3 things your coworkers can absolutely, or those you lead, can absolutely expect from you? What are 3 things that I can absolutely guarantee from you? Okay, write them down. What are 3 things that your people can expect? And as you're writing them, let me give you some examples. My people can absolutely expect that I will be 5 minutes late. My people can absolutely expect a flippant comment at an inappropriate time in an important meeting. My people can absolutely expect that I will roll my eyes anytime somebody makes a ridiculous suggestion. How many of you know what I just said? For some of you, if I had a beer with your people, they would be able to articulate what they can absolutely expect from you. Yes or no? Yes. And it might not be positive. But I want to hear those positive ones. But let's be honest, there are some expectations that you've set with your people that isn't necessarily positive. It's just your behavior. And it's become so consistent that they've come to expect it. So now let's proactively identify what they can expect. All right, somebody share one with me.
Well, it was interesting for me when I sent out the survey, I had a lot of feedback saying that I was helpful.
Okay, so in your specific instance, one of your pieces of your code of conduct is, my people can absolutely expect me to be helpful. Okay, awesome. Somebody else. We'll keep that to ourselves. That's right. Somebody else. Something that your people can absolutely expect from you. Okay, support. Now, let's do the same exercise. Tell me tangible ways that support manifests itself.
Easy. Did it this morning. I basically announced that my 2014 budget is due, and I wanted everybody's input. Help me justify it.
Awesome. And then I'm going to assume that you have some practical ways that you're meeting with people for that input, or some ways that they can give you that input. How many would say that is a clear manifestation of what people can expect? And Guy, I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyways. Do you regularly do that as you're building budgets?
Yeah, I do. And not only that, once it's approved, they look at the numbers I walked in with. They know what was approved, and if there's a difference between the two or variance, they know I had a challenging time or it was smooth sailing.
So if I understand correctly, for all of us, and this is pretty cool, so Guy sits down with his people and says, it's budget time. You're going to help me justify numbers. You're going to give me your input. You're going to give me your insight. You're going to give me your operational expertise and vocational knowledge, because some of you have a PhD in what you do, 10,000 hours. Many of your employees spent more than 10,000 hours doing what they do, right? Which would only be 5 years, maybe 6, depending on how many hours. So if they got more than 6 years experience, they got 10,000 hours. If they got 10,000 hours, they got a PhD level of experience. So he's tapping into that operational expertise. He's asking for their input. He's building a budget accordingly. And then he shares with them what the outcome was. Do you think that they will be more or less likely to work within that budget?
Well, I think what is instilled is, ownership and buy-in.
Absolutely, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. He's a catalyst for responsibility.
Then on top of that, at variance on a monthly basis, they see it as well.
Okay, so they get to see
The numbers are.
the report card every month.
Every month.
Every month. Very, very good. Would you say that that would be a manifestation of one of the things that his people can guarantee from him? Yes or no? Is that called authenticity? He says what he is, and then he walks it out in daily practicality more times than not. All right, somebody else. What can your people expect from you?
Active listening.
Active listening. Give me some tangible ways that you active listen, and you can't say, I listen in meetings. Give me another tangible way that you actively listen.
Well, when people want to come in and they want to share a problem, a conflict with a coworker, whatever, I want to hear what they have to say, think about it, not be committing to a course of action, talk to the other person, understand what the conflict is, and then try to resolve it. Put a plan in action to resolve it. So hearing what people feel.
Okay, so that's really, really good. That sounds good. And when I talk with you about gathering thoughts, ideas, and concerns, when I talk with you about that, one of the comments that I'm going to make will be offensive, which is, if you utilize an open door policy, you're a fool. What? Open door policy is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Because how many people are really going to walk in the open door with the contentious, deep problem? How many would agree with me? Few. Few, because it's tough to walk in the open door. So you say, I have an open door policy, but that is a reactive management approach. A proactive management approach would be going and soliciting feedback. A proactive management approach would be that I sit down with you and talk about what are the problems before they become problems. That I have multiple ways to gather information, some anonymous, some face-to-face. Now, I'm not going to go into depth because there's a whole half-hour teaching on it. So you're right. What you just said sounds awesome, but now we need to bring it down into a proactive exercise, not waiting for them to come in the door. How many agree with me? If I'm waiting for them to come in the door, it's already too late. Already too late. I got to be out there digging up the problem before it becomes a problem. So not today, but sometime probably within the next week and a half, go to the portal. It'll say gathering thoughts, ideas, and concerns. And I'll give you a process to truly be an active listener. Active listening is not sitting in your office and waiting for somebody to walk in and tell you there's a problem or tell you a great idea. That's not active listening. That's passive listening. Active listening is going out and seeking it. We'll talk about that another time. Yes, sir.
I thought open door policy is more like an open character, not necessarily a physical door.
Agreed. Totally agree. I hear the heart of it, but I think that needs to be translated into proactive activity. So in other words, if I really am open to your suggestions, I will regularly ask you. If I'm open to your suggestions, I'll have a process of what to do with your suggestions. If I'm open to your suggestions, I'll have a process for prioritizing those suggestions and implementing them. If I'm open to your suggestions, you'll know what that process is. And you'll know if you make a suggestion, you're going to get one of 3 answers. Yes, no, not right now. So that is an open door policy in its spirit, which is I'm open to you. Make sense? As opposed to, I have an open door policy, come in and talk to me whenever you'd like. To me, that's not really an open door policy. Because it's not a proactive solicitation of your thoughts, ideas, and concerns that is then prioritized and implemented. How many agree with me? That's a completely different thing. Yes, sir.
I'm getting a little confused.
Sure.
Mind moving to that on your processes.
Okay.
Okay. So if delegation is so important, and I delegate to those who report to me to delegate to those who report to them.
I'm listening to you. I'm listening.
And then
staff on a
Regular basis.
Those are the times I expect to hear from those items that you're talking about now. But I have would be commonly known, I think, in my office as an open door policy.
Sure.
With them. But my job isn't to go out there to their reports and seek out that. I've delegated that to them. And if I do that, then I'm taking away their authority or their responsibility to take on that delegation that they've been given.
I agree with you, except to say this. Human nature flies in the face of what you just described. So, and again, I don't want to go into the weeds, but I do want to answer your question. So what I came to find was this, that there's two kinds of communication. If my goal is to create an effective team, I have to, at the same time, hold the authority and dignity of my direct reports, but I also have to find out what the hell is really going on. I have to have mechanisms in place for both. So, in my opinion, you have to have two ways that people can give you information. You have to have two ways. You have to have formal, or call it formal, and informal. Hold on, just wait. So I've got to have a way to formally go out and solicit information. Why? Because I need people's thoughts, I need their ideas, and I need to identify the concerns. And in my opinion, I need to be proactively doing that. I can't wait till it becomes a mushroom cloud. I've got to go out and seek out the problem before there are problems. So from my opinion, I've got all this talent, I've got all this ability, I've got all this operational wisdom. Somehow I need to bring that to the forefront so that we can be the best that we can be. To do that, I have to have a process that's both formal and informal. Now, what's informal? Informal might be the old Deming management by walking around. Informal might be me going and spending time with each of the employees casually in my various departments. And what am I doing? I'm listening. I'm listening when I walk in. I'll use that water treatment plant. When I walk into the water treatment plant and I say, "Hey boys, how you doing?" And they all go like this. "Yeah, we're fine." What do I know? They're not fine. How do you agree? They're not fine. They won't look me in the eye. They don't say hello. They're looking at the floor. How many degree? Not fine. So management by walking around. So informal information gathering. I'm information gathering informally. But then I got to have formal information gathering, in my opinion. And it's got to be in two forms. It's got to be in a face-to-face form. And it's got to be anonymous. Why do I need anonymous, some kind of anonymous vehicle to gather information? Why do I need an anonymous mechanism for people to tell me what's going on? Why do you think that would be important?
Some people want to speak their mind but don't feel like they can.
So some people in the human interpersonal dynamic don't feel comfortable telling me, well, if they won't put their name on it, I'm not listening. Well, then you're in my opinion, you're a fool. Because you might have the sincerest, sweetest person of all time that truly cares about the organization but feels intimidated, feels scared, feels, so you want to give a mechanism. I'm not going to go in deep depth, but when you watch that video, I give you a flow chart for this. But to answer your question now, I got to unpack the whole thing. I got to unpack it to some degree. Now, your concern was, if I heard your question accurately, your concern revolved around holding the dignity and integrity of your direct report who you've delegated authority to. And you can't undermine that or circumvent that because that hangs them out to dry. You've got to hold their authority to some degree. But at the same time, I've got to give mechanisms for the people to feel like they're being listened to and heard. I've got to be able to do both. So by providing them a way that I meet and me and my supervisor, my direct report, meet with them to gather their face-to-face feedback, I call those round tables, but also giving them an anonymous way to communicate with me. And I'm doing my own information gathering informally. All three of those pieces come to one central point. I'll call it a clearinghouse, where I'm validating what I see or hear. So not any one of these things carries more weight than the other. What I'm trying to do is give my people a way that they can communicate, and I'm actually going to them and trying to solicit that information. instead of sitting in my office waiting for it to come into me. Now, in your specific instance, you said something that's outstanding. You said, I meet with them on a regular basis. So you're doing a piece of this already. You're doing this piece right here. And you might even be doing that piece over there. You're informally listening. But I think it's comprehensive. Now, here's where the real kicker is. So I heard something when I was walking around. I then checked it out when I met formally to see if it was accurate. And then I had some kind of survey, suggestion box, whatever, that would also give people an outlet. If I hear it in all three places, what does it tell me? What's that? Valid. And I need to do something. The challenge is I usually don't have a process. I don't usually have a process once I've gathered that thought, idea, or concern. I don't usually have a process to do something with it. Because we all go, we're too busy. If you just came up with one great idea every 6 months, would that be good for you in your small area or your large area? One good idea. Yeah, if you could come up with one good idea. So it's in my best interest to be generating ideas. The problem with idea generation is it creates more work. And as it creates more work, people have an aversion to it because I'm already buried. So I will give you a process of what to do with that idea. Because first you have to prioritize those ideas. Then you have to pick out the one that someone's going to try to implement. And the problem with that is, who's going to do that? So simply put, and again, not to go too deep in the weeds, what I recommend is you go back to the stakeholder group that had the idea. You guys had this great idea. I need some help in vetting that idea. Who would be willing to take a little bit of your time to work on a little subcommittee to do that? Now, what if they all say this? No. Then what do you know about the idea? Not that important. If they all say yes, perfect. I know it's important. So it becomes a user-driven process from there. So I'm going to hold the integrity of my leader because they are the key to my success. But I also know human nature and know that all of us need to gain feedback on our performance. And that all of us need to gain feedback on how we're doing. Have I role modeled the behavior? Have I role modeled the behavior? Think now. Have I role modeled the behavior of getting feedback on performance? How did I role model that behavior? What was the first thing I asked you to do within the first 3 weeks? I asked you to do what? Send out a survey. So I've role modeled the behavior. I've said it's okay to have people give us feedback about our performance. And I'll do it first, and then there'll be times that I'll allow people to give you feedback on your performance. And I'll be regularly checking on how you're doing. I'll be meeting with the employees. I'll be meeting with you. I'll be doing it formally, informally, and formally. And people will be able to tell us how we're doing anonymously as well. Because I'm going to project strength by being open. I'm going to project strength by being transparent. I'm going to project strength by allowing you to have a say. I'm going to project strength by allowing you to evaluate me. So I think in that sense, I do hold the integrity and dignity of people. Now, that was a long-winded answer to your question, and you may not agree, but I do think it balances your concern of how do I hold their integrity as a leader, how do I delegate authority to them, but also give my people a way that they can give feedback on performance. But frankly, a very important piece of that is I've role modeled it first. I've been open to so that direct report, even though I'm checking on them, what do they get to do to me? They get to give me feedback. So anyways, that's where I'm coming from on it. Did that help clarify? I didn't say you agree, but did that clarify?
But your last statement says then to have an open door policy, of which you said not to have an
No. I said passively sitting in your office waiting for people to come in is completely different than what I just described.
But allowing them that open door policy is important to allow them to come in and see you.
Giving them mechanisms where they can anonymously and regularly tell us how we're doing is completely different than saying, I have an open door policy, come to me if you have a problem. Giving them every 90 days a survey that goes directly to EDSS that I don't even see until it's vetted, that's an open door policy. Or that's the spirit. That's in the spirit of an open door policy. which is completely different than I sit in my office and tell my employees, now you can come and talk to me anytime. I'm here for you. I'm here for you. If you got any problems, you got any issues, you just come and tell me, which is usually the manifestation of an open door policy. You see the difference? Again, you may not agree, but I think they are fundamentally different. Because in this instance, I am aggressively looking for what we're not doing right. I'm aggressively trying to get your ideas from you. I'm aggressively trying to show you that I value you by asking your opinion, and I know you have to go. See you later.
I'm not leaving because
No, I know. Very good timing, though. Stir up crap, and then leave. That's awesome. See you later. And thank you for your comment and question. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
On the survey thing?
Yeah.
You know, and I think there's some minds when you kind of venture into that solicited opinion.
Yep.
Mode in that we need to recognize how to interpret feedback from a solicited opinion. You know, tell me what's wrong. There's nothing wrong. No, I want to hear it, but come on, you need to tell me what's wrong.
So to that end, there'll be an email that'll come out in the next 3 weeks, not this 3 weeks, in the next 3 weeks, where I'll give you questions for specific things. Emotional response, here's the questions I ask. Value response, here's the question I ask. Factual responses, here's the question I ask. So the way you ask the questions dictate the data that you gather. And the check and balance of that in my system is that I'm going to gather it in multiple places to validate it. So any one of those is not enough. So if somebody sends in a survey and it says, my supervisor's a jerk and somebody should do something, I'm going to file a grievance. If I got a survey like that, I'm not reacting to that immediately. I'm going to have a face-to-face meeting and just general information gathering. I'm going to go and check it out myself. I'm going to try to validate that comment or disprove it. So I have multiple points of entry for information so I can have some kind of check and balance. Yes?
Ian, with my staff, there's definitely I don't know if you want to call it a culture of fear, but they're afraid of retaliation. They don't want to do the survey because they're going to know, I said this about you and you're going to target me.
Correct.
Or even though I don't think I have ever given anybody any
Reason to think that way. Right.
to think that.
So,
Really, I don't.
so what I would say, the way that I would do it is I would stand up in front of everybody and say, I know that all of you don't feel comfortable. I know that all of you are afraid. So I'm going to have multiple points of information.
But you say that, but you're trying to trap us.
And I would,
We'll know who doesn't like
right,
us.
and I would,
You can come back and get me.
right, and so then I would be as transparent as possible with them with the process. So when you watch that video, you'll see I lay it out very cleanly. And then I would just be honest and say, I know you don't believe me. All I can do now is walk this out over the coming months. And one of the keys to them believing you is this piece. So the suggestion box, the survey, all of that, it might not be that they don't believe, but they don't believe anything's going to be done with it. And that's why this piece and everything that happens after it is so critical. That I have a system of response. So, again, I'm already in the weeds, so I'll just keep going. So, one, that I give them the time frame of response. You can expect a response in 1 month. You can expect a response every 70 days. You can, whatever it is, just make sure you do it. So, all the ideas come in to the suggestion box, the survey, everyone is responded to. That's the first step in building trust. The next step in building trust. Every response only has one of three answers. Yes, no, not right now. Yes, no, not right now. It gets one of those answers. And then some way that you take the best of those and do something with them. So I didn't do this survey for nothing. Whatever happens to this information, it just goes somewhere and then that's it. As soon as you actually start taking their information and doing something with it, as soon as you start acting on their responses, they'll begin to trust you, and what else will they begin to trust? The process. And that's the key. I got to get them to trust the process. One, I'll have a process, which will begin the steps of trust. 2, I'll make sure the process is transparent. 3, I'll make sure we do what we say we're going to do in the process. And 4, I'll make sure there's tangible results from the process. They'll begin to trust the process. Depending on how toxic the environment is, that might take 90 days, that might take a year. But here's the one thing I know for a fact. I need them to take greater responsibility. I have to have them take greater responsibility. Feedback gathering is a great way to get someone to get buy-in. Buy-in. So watch that video. I think it will help you. Okay? All right. Last one. What are 3 things you will not tolerate? Well, it was a long rabbit trail, brother. It was a long rabbit trail. Went all the way out to the trail and back. 3 things that you will not tolerate. Write them down, quick, because we're moving on a rabbit trail there. 3 things that you will not tolerate. 3 things that you will not tolerate. Anybody willing to share one of them? Tattling. Do you have little kids?
Raised 2 girls, I have 2 grandsons.
There you go. That's right. Sounds like my house. Tattling. Will not tolerate tattling. Somebody else. Dishonesty. Somebody else. Incompetence. Okay, somebody else.
Poor quality of work.
Poor quality of work. Now, what's the first thing you have to do with these 3 things you will no longer that you will not tolerate? It's the first thing you have to do with them. You have to look at the box up at the top. You say, yeah, I was wondering why we didn't cover the little box at the top. Look at that box right there. Often we tend to judge ourselves on our intentions and others on their actions. So when you look at question number 3, you better filter it through that. That's right. So I got a phone call from my wife. Ian, yes, honey. Did you change the light bulb in the garage? And how many of you know, any men in the room right now, you know that this is exactly what I was doing in my mind. Holy crap, did I change the light bulb in the garage? Oh my God. I can hear it coming. I can already hear it coming. And I said, why do you ask? She said, because I went out to the garage and I caught and clipped myself because there was no light and my shin is cut on your dirty, rusty bike. How many of you men know that I'm about to hear everything I've ever done wrong in the last 13 years of marriage? Right? And that's what happened. You're irresponsible. You always leave me with it. And I love you, Gina, to death. But you know that's exactly what happened. And it did happen. Now, what did I say to her? But honey, you knew I was trying to get on the plane. I was late. I know I'll do it when I get back. My intention was to do it. The result for her is a big cut on her shin. Now, here's what's funny. I hang up the phone. This was a few months ago when it was colder. And I'm in the hotel. And the heater's not working in the hotel. This is literally minutes later. I call the front desk. I'm like, hey, I told you the heater's not working in my room. It's starting to get really freaking cold, and I'd like to go to sleep. And I'm freezing in here. Send somebody down. Oh, you know, we're really busy tonight. I'm trying to get somebody down there. You know what? I don't really care if you're trying to get somebody down here. I need my heater fixed now. What was I judging her on? Her actions. What was I expecting my wife to do? Judge me on my intentions. So when you look at question number 3, please take a look at them through the filter of action, not through the filter of intention. And if you really want to have a great code of conduct, you'll stop evaluating yourself on intention and you'll start evaluating yourself on action. Not today, but at another time, I ask you to thoughtfully consider those questions. There are only 9 responses, but they are the framework of a code of conduct. If you want people to take greater responsibility for you, then I would strongly encourage you to thoughtfully consider your code of conduct and how you do life. All right. You're going to get an email about buy-in, so watch that and listen to it because we've run out a little bit. We've only got 12, 13 minutes left, 14 minutes left. So I want to lay the framework for this thing called pride. How many of you have employees that take great pride in their work? Raise your hand. Give me some manifestations, or how do I see pride? How do I see pride? Can't touch it, but how do I see it? Quality work. Quality work. What else?
Hours spent.
Hours spent. Somebody else. Initiative. So, when I see pride from another human being, I see quality work, I see initiative, I see problem solving, I see come in early, stay late. What else do I see? Attitude, more positive. What else do I see? Happy employees. Less stress in the workplace. What else do I see? Willingness and openness. What else do I see? Ownership. Now, watch now. High return on investment activity. Should I work on initiative? Should I work on dependability? Should I work on all the things that you just mentioned? Or should I work on the thing that those things emanate from? See, I think you should work on the thing those things emanate from, pride. But most of us in this room do not have in our strategic toolkit a process for the instilling of, the cultivation of, and the deployment of pride. What used to teach us pride? What were the institutions that used to teach us pride?
Family.
Okay, family. What else?
School system.
School system. What else? Church. What else? Or place of faith.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that leaders for the last 2,000 years or more have known this? What were some of the mechanisms that community leaders used to build pride? What's that?
You lead by example if you enter in community.
Okay, lead by example. Give me some other. A vision. How about this? Monuments. Why did we build huge monuments? Pride. So we could look at that and say, we won that battle against those bad people. And we were victorious. We come from the victorious people. As opposed to, we come from the losers. Pride. We built community pride. Why were there athletic endeavors? To build the mind, body, and spirit, certainly, but also a source of pride. Why was there a crest? Why did we follow a flag? These were all ways to build. Why did the Athenians turn out on the battlefield of Marathon? They would die if they didn't, but also because they had deep pride in the city they loved. See, I think you can create pride. Now, where do we usually see pride manifest itself in performance? What sector of life today? In the sports arena. So coaches do a phenomenal job of utilizing pride to get people to give their all. And isn't it funny, we get vicarious pride when we had the Vancouver Olympics, right? And we see somebody have great success, and we all get proud in our town, and that person lives 100 kilometers from us, but all of a sudden we claim them, right? Go to Caroline, Alberta, right? And everybody's like, I know Kurt Browning. I love him. He's my buddy. Have you ever met him? No, but man, he's us. We are him. We are Caroline, Alberta, right? Whatever it might be. So my point to you is, how do we deploy that? How do we cultivate that in another human being? So I did an in-depth study of it. And I broke it down into this flow chart that you see. How do I build pride? Now, the point of doing it is this. Because if I can build pride in you, you'll give me a little bit more. You'll come in early. You'll stay late. You'll take greater ownership of your work. There's less stress, less call-ins, less sick time. So let me intentionally try to build pride. Now, here's the funny thing. There's two kinds of pride. There's two kinds of pride. There's organizational pride, and there's individual pride. Organizational pride and individual pride. What do you think the difference is between the two? Organizational pride, individual pride. What's the difference? Organizational pride, individual pride. Have you ever seen an employee that takes tremendous pride in their work, but doesn't like the organization they work for? That's the difference between organizational pride and individual pride. Now, this person takes great pride in their work, but doesn't really care for the organization. Why is that not okay? Why is that not the ideal? Why do I want them to have pride in the organization as well? What is...
They affect and influence others.
Right. So, loyalty to the organization, higher morale, increased participation in problem solving. So, I take pride in my personal work, but I'm not going to get involved in anything else. But when I take pride in the organization, I help build systems and processes that make the organization better or my department better. So I need both. I would suggest to you that you need to have a strategy for both. Now, again, because we're proactive, holistic systems thinkers, we don't wait for this. In other words, we don't wait for pride to walk in the door. Some of you have been very blessed. You have employees that make you look good every day because pride walked in the door. Or you got lucky and you walked in a place that already had pride. But instead, we're going to be proactive in its development. We're going to make it a part of our absolute toolkit. So, two things: organizational, individual. They're going to be sequential and systematic so that we can ensure that they're always going to happen. Why am I going to make sure that it's sequential and systematic? What's my attempt here? What am I trying to create? Anybody know? Starts with a C. Close. Culture. By making it systematic and regular, I will create a culture. How many of you can name a sports organization that you would say has a culture of pride? That they are consistently successful. Does anybody know a sports organization like that? Okay. Manchester United football. Green Bay Packers down in the States. Anybody else?
Canadians, hockey team, probably the most prideful as well.
Okay. Does anybody know of a company like that? Any companies like that? Microsoft, Apple, Patagonia. These are major multinational corporations that you envision. Were there times that the big three automakers used to be like that? Yeah. Some of our manufacturing sector used to be like that. So you're trying to create that same thing with your people. That they're proud to work for you. They're proud to wear the RMWB logo. They're proud to say they're from your department. So how do I do that? Okay, step number one. Step number one, I've got to be able to articulate why what we do is important. Why what we do is important. Why do you think that's so important? Why do I have to be able to articulate the importance of the work? If I can't explain to you, Diane, so if I look at Diane and I say, you know what, Diane, your work's not that important. You're kind of like an interchangeable part. You don't really have that much value to us. And frankly, the work that we do isn't very valuable either. Is she possibly going to take pride? Hell no. There's no way. But as soon as I say this, you're a critical linchpin to the organizational structure. You're a critical linchpin to the way the operation runs. You are critical. Is there a fertile ground for pride? Now, in everything that your people do, is there value? To thousands upon thousands of citizens, yes or no? So, how am I explaining that? Are you regularly and consistently explaining the importance of what you do? Okay, and that sounds really, really good, but that's not what I asked. What I asked was, are you explaining their importance and the importance of the work that you do? Yes. Tell everybody what you do again.
I do work for traffic.
What's that?
I work for traffic.
Okay, so you work traffic, public works, the like.
The whole 9 yards.
Okay, how many would agree with me? Significant importance to the citizens of the area. But are we regularly communicating how many billions of dollars of commerce go over our roads? Are we regularly communicating how many kids go to school safely every day? Are we regularly communicating the value of the infrastructure? And if you don't want to know how value it is, how about being that guy from BC that ran into the pole that collapsed the bridge down in the States? Oh, was he Alberta? From Thoreau? Oh, Spruce Grove. Wow. Stony Plains, Spruce Grove. Tri-Leisure Center. Listen now. And yet, how many would agree with me, those guys and gals that work in that department are usually the least appreciated. And yet, billions of dollars of commerce, safety, security, all of that comes from the work that they do of the roads and the like. What I'm getting at is, your people make a contribution to that, yes or no? And do they know the value of what they do? Or do they see in themselves as interchangeable parts that just do menial tasks and nobody cares?
No, I think we see what we're doing as being good.
Perfect.
And I praise them for that.
Perfect. So each one of you, how would you explain to your people that what they do has redeeming value and the importance of it? If you can't, the likelihood that they're going to take pride is minimal. Pride in the organization. So first, number one, why what we do is important. Now here's the next one. and this is tough, why we're any good at it. Why are we any good? You see, it's easy to make the case that public servants are important. It's easy to make the case that we as a municipality touch every citizen from cradle to grave. It's easy to make the point that every citizen is positively or negatively affected by us cumulatively. That's easy. But the next step is, why are we any good? So in other words, it might sound something like this. Sure, you can tell me that the work we do is important, but why are we any good at it? That's the next step in pride. So how do I communicate to somebody that we're any good? I got to have standards. We're reluctant to utilize standards, but I'm telling you, standards is the beginning of pride. Some kind of objective standard that says, here's where we stand. You could use industry standards. You could even use internal standards that you create. We were able to process this paperwork in 24 hours. Industry standard is 48. Woo! We were able to process in 48 hours. Industry standard is 12. Ugh. Pride. If I took you bowling, anybody ever bowled? But you had never bowled before, and I brought you to the bowling lane, and I set up a sheet in front of the pins, and you had never bowled. And I handed you the ball, and I said to you, now, I want you to roll down this ball, down that wood, right there in the middle. Don't let it go on either side in those little half tunnels there. Don't do that. Just keep it in the middle. Just roll it down there. Under the sheet? Yeah, roll it under the sheet. And you took the ball and you rolled it under the sheet. And after it went under the sheet, you heard a noise. How long would you play that game? Not very long. But if I took the sheet away, you would knock down 4 or 5. When I handed you the ball, what would you inherently do the next time I handed you the ball? You would try to knock down more. Standards are just like that. So step number 1, why what we do is important. Regularly communicating it. Step number 2, why we're any good at it. Step number 3, regularly communicating both. Regularly communicating both. Where's Guy at? So Guy's doing this. Guy sits down and says, I got to build a budget. You're going to help me. Give me some input. Give me some feedback. Together we're going to build a budget. Then every month, what does he come back and do? He pulls the sheet back. He lets them bowl. And Guy, do you find that when you're doing that and doing it regularly, do they take greater ownership of the budget, yes or no? And when they exceed, do you see their chest come up and say, we did it? And when they don't, their heads come down a little bit and say, we got to do better.
Well, their chest expanded, I noticed that this year more than the previous year. The previous year, basically, it was a competition. Well, how come you're not underspent? It was peer pressure. Or if you're underspent, then I could spend more on my side. And
okay.
Competition between trades, right?
Right.
Now, I'm not seeing that. Now it's more flat and
team.
It's a team.
Okay, awesome. Has that improved performance?
Oh, very much so.
Okay, so he's walking this out. He's telling them that their work is important. He's showing that by letting them be a part. He's got some kind of standard, and he's regularly communicating it on a monthly basis. Simply and practically walking this through. Now remember, we're going to take a week to talk about this, not this coming week, but the following. So I'm not going to unpack it to too great of a degree. And there's some other keys to this operationally and practically and the like, which I'll go into another time. I just want to set the framework. All right, individual pride. So individual pride is different than organizational pride. How do I build individual pride? The first thing I got to do is show them how they personally contribute to this. How they personally impact this. And how their specific task is valuable to the overall. This is a very overt example, even though it's not in the public sector, but it's very clear. Maids, room attendants. So in my previous life, I had like 300 room attendants running this huge hotel casino. 300. How many agree with me? They usually don't feel very important. Sometimes they get treated poorly. Guests treat them poorly. People treat them poorly. And you're not running around your life saying to everybody, hey, I'm a room attendant. It doesn't have the greatest connotation in society. But what I explained to them was this. If there's one hair in a bed, that person will not come back. That's how important you are. If they pull back a sheet and they see hair in the bed, they're not coming back. So you're the most valuable person on this staff. So I tried to relate to them how they personally impacted the work itself, and how their 8 hours or 6 hours or 10 hours or whatever their shift is, how they made a significant impact into the greater. That's why you hear me always saying, and you guys might get tired of it, you hear me saying, you touch every citizen from cradle to grave. There is nobody else in our society like a public servant. You touch every citizen, cumulatively, every citizen in a meaningful way from cradle to grave. Microsoft can't say that. Apple can't say that. Air Canada can't say that. Nobody can say that. But you can say that. And then you've got to show them how they do it, and whether they interact with citizens directly or support those who do. And I know we're late. Give me 3 more minutes. Everybody hang in there for 3 more minutes. So if I can show them that, I got a shot at getting them to build individual pride. Now they're going home and saying to their kid, I do something meaningful. I do something important. I am of value. And what a phenomenal gift to give another human being. And only you, the leader, can give them that gift. All right, what's the next step? So then, it's similar. I've got to be able to have some kind of standard to prove that to them. I've got to be able to say, look, your work is important, and dang it, you do it pretty good. Or at minimum, say, you're not doing it so well, let me give you some tips and ideas of how to do it better. I don't think people are wary of standards. I think people are wary of how they'll be applied, and as you said, what will be done to them. But I think people want to know where they stand. I do believe that. I think people, hey, just tell me where I stand. Where it gets sticky is if the standard is poorly applied, if it's inconsistently applied, or if they've been burned by it in the past. That's when they get very defensive about it. All right. Final thought for today. Final thought for today. Not only do I have to have this standard, but I have to be able to celebrate. And in that video, and in the follow-up communication, I'll talk with you about ways to celebrate people's performance that has nothing to do with Employee of the Month, that has nothing to do with parties and pizza, has nothing to do with those things. That is more meaningful and deeper and broader and more profound than that. And like, here's a little one that I'll give you right now, but you'll hear me say it again. I stopped putting stuff in people's files. I started sending notes home. If I knew their address, if I knew the name of their spouse, I sent the commendation to their house. And I sent it to their loved one on their behalf. Why would I do that?
More personal, it's more intimate.
It's more intimate, it's more personal. Why else?
It lets them know what their partner is doing and achieving.
Every one of us in this room wants somebody to be proud of us. Every one of us in this room wants someone we love to be proud of us. And so I just thought it was a good idea to let those people at home know that their spouse, their dad, their mom was doing a hell of a job for me. And so I sent them a note to the house. Now it went in the file as well, but it went directly to the house. There's a public servant just like you. He's a director. He happens to be in the States. He just emailed me. His name is Rick. He just emailed me on Friday of last week and said, Ian, I started doing that. It's amazing to me how many people have walked up to me and said, with tears in their eyes, thank you for sending that note to my house. And one lady said, in 33 years of public service, I've never gotten a greater reward than that note you sent to my husband about how good a job I do. Now, I don't mean to be melodramatic, but in today's day and age where people are getting the hell kicked out of them every day and life is hard, I would suggest let's build pride. I would suggest let's build up the human spirit. I would suggest that when they're not doing the job well, tell them the truth, but then have a process and system for coaching them, as we've talked about in the past. Let's build pride so that somebody walks around and has something they can hold on to that has meaning and value. And because they spend the majority of their life at work, let's make it the workplace. Yes, sir.
Good question. Some of my direct reports are single. I have no loved ones at home. How do you get the same?
Well, what I've done in those specific instances, if I've gotten to know them well enough and the relationship is strong, I've even sent those notes to parents, letting them know. You know, like if I hear a lady say to me, yeah, I'm out here from Newfoundland, my parents are back home, and I learn a little bit about them, and so on and so forth, and I just say, hey, I'd like to send something back to the house, back to home. Can I get an address? They don't know what it is, and I send it off. I've done that before, you know. All I'm trying to get you to thoughtfully consider is pride. You've seen it, its value. Do you have a way to instill it, cultivate it, and deploy it? In the coming 3 weeks, we'll talk about that. All right, I know we're long and I apologize. So over the next 3 weeks, a catalyst for responsibility. How do I become a Pericles in my own little world? Thank you for your time. See you later. Bye-bye.